coast to coast.
Well,
To
I'm glad to be with you again, Elissa. How are
them
how
as
are
well.
things in your neck of the country on the East Coast?
Things are okay. They're pretty good. Not too hot today. It's July 26th, 2023, and we're really happy to be with everybody. So,
Well,
what do you have on your mind for today, Chuck?
well, first of all, we're enjoying the weather here. It is a little hotter than usual, but not like some of the people suffering in our country today.
I know.
Today, the topic is many times you and I will we've talked about this, and that we'll have a client that will either send us some information and talk about their partner and saying, I'm living with a narcissist because here are the qualities of a narcissist. This person matches them all. And that becomes a real concern, because if a person is a real narcissist, it is really impossible to have a relationship with them. But what we find is that's not always the case.
Right, exactly. So when we work with couples and we start to slow things down, we often find that rather than it being, one person being a narcissist, it's both partners really in a state of trying to protect their position and their worldview because they have felt not seen, not attended to or nurtured for some time, and it appears that they're constantly just thinking about their own perspective from being in this dynamic, really, where they haven't felt heard or seen for a long time.
That's very interesting, because when you say a person feels like they haven't been heard or seen, they feel like their perspective is not honored or valued.
Mhm.
And we find that in a relationship, when you're experiencing that, by definition, your partner is experiencing the same thing.
Mhm. Exactly.
And so we have this issue we call self-absorption, which is not a judgmental term. Self-absorption means I'm absorbed in my own perspective because I don't have another perspective. And
Mhm.
if my relationship is disconnected and I don't see my partner, then I'm relegated to my own self-absorbed perspective. And in
Right.
that perspective, I'm feeling like I'm not being heard. I'm feeling like my partner is narcissistic. And I say, not there's a difference between being a narcissist and being narcissistic in your behavior. I'm very narcissistic in my behavior until I have another perspective. And
Mhm.
that's what gets me out of my own self-absorption, to see there's another person in the room, there's another reality. Hey, Chuck, you're in a relationship here. It's not just you.
Mhm. Right. And so I think what you're saying makes so much sense. But how do people see that? I think the question is, how do we get to the point where we can see the other person and appreciate the other's perspective? And I think that's when possibilities really open up to stretch beyond our own perspective and enjoy that, see that it can actually be a safe place of growth and new opportunities. But how do we actually get there? I mean, how do we go from protecting our own worldview, our own feelings, our own experience, to feeling safe, to being open to the other and being open to more? How do we do that?
Well, one thing to realize is that the way we normally do it normally doesn't work. It won't. The way I normally do is I feel triggered in my reaction. I feel like when I do that, the space between us is not safe because I'm criticizing you, or I'm pulling away from you, or I'm doing something that's contributing to the lack of safety we feel between us. And
Mhm.
so the way to be able to see another person's perspective is not to demand to be heard, but it's to stop and start going one at a time, listening and
Mhm.
using, and of course, you and I use the Imago dialogue process, which is, I think, the best tool on the planet that at least that I've, to help a person stop and really understand there's this, and see and validate another reality without reacting to it.
Mhm. Right, exactly. So when we can make that space through the mirroring, and just really slowing it down. Did I get that? That's what you're saying, rather than reacting. but really being a receiver of the other's reality without judging it, but just really being an accepting, safe space. And the other can actually see themselves more and feel this incredible thing of being heard. And then that just starts to change the whole energy between the two, which makes it safe for that person to feel heard. And then in return, they're going to want to hear about your perspective as well, because it feels safe, because you're not going to cut each other off. You're not going to demand that you think a certain way or feel a certain way, that both can be true. And that just really changes things, where you can both be yourselves and really thrive.
That's the goal. And I hope that our listeners heard what you said, in that because you painted the picture of what it looks like. And of course, we both know it's another thing to get there, because unconsciously we have a reaction to difference. The Harville Hendricks says conflict is the cause of the reason we have conflict is an objection to difference. I have certain projections, my own narcissistic, no, my own self-absorbed, my own perspective. I'm looking at you, I'm projecting, I'm thinking who you are. And if I'm looking at my intimate partner, I'm thinking that this is the way this person is. And when they show up differently, there's a reaction that causes anxiety and negativity in the space between. And so I've got to overcome that, because it's unconscious. But if I don't overcome that, then I'm contributing to the negativity. So what you said, stop. Let me see if I got what you said. And then the differentiation, because when we are self-absorbed, we're in what we call a symbiosis, where we are, I'm thinking you are me, you are I, to use proper language, and I'm thinking that we are the same. When you appear differently, I go to a reactivity. But what the dialogue enables us to do is what we call differentiation, where you can have a boundary in terms of who you are. That boundary separates us, but it doesn't disconnect us. The boundary separates us so that we can actually, as Harville and Helen have coined the idea, a safe conversation is one where we talk without criticism, we listen without judgment, and we connect beyond our differences. So our differences, our different perspectives are intact, but we're no longer reactive, and we're able to connect beyond those differences. That's what the Imago dialogue provides for people. And then what I find is that this person who wrote to us and said, my partner is a narcissist and I can't get anywhere with him or her, then what we find is that when we take time to do this, that person is perfectly able to empathize. It's just they never slow down enough to get out of the reactivity phase for that person to be able to do that.
Exactly.
And so in most cases, the person's not a narcissist.
Right.
But narcissistic behavior, sure.
Right.
But with the right tools, we can learn to empathize and come out of our self-absorption and connect with someone different from us.
Right. Once we feel safe and we understand that it's okay to be different.
Well, thank you for this conversation. As usual, it's always a pleasure. And we thank you for watching. And if you have a comment you'd like to make, or if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. And we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you. Have a good month.
Bye-bye.